Chapter 5. The first sapling snapped up, plunging Mud's sword towards Hera's heart. Hera twisted away and stumbled into the second trap. The sharp blade sliced through the air, a deadly stroke that would have cut a grown man's throat. Fortunately, Hera was a good bit shorter. The dagger whizzed over her head and stood there, wobbling back and forth on top of the sapling. Mud dropped his bow as he jumped from the tree and raced over to his sister. "Hera," he said, wrapping her in a tight hug. She could have been cut down by his weapons. "Oh, my baby sister." She felt so fragile in his arms. He pressed his cheek against her soft blonde hair. "I am not a baby." She shoved him away and picked up the short bow she dropped while dodging his trap. Mud swallowed. He'd never seen Hera in anything besides the dress before. She stood in front of him now, wearing breeches and a green shirt covered by leather armor similar to Mud's. Instead of ribbons and curls, her hair was tied back into a tight bun. The bow rested in her hand as if it had been there all of her life, only he'd never noticed it before. She wore a long knife sheathed on either hip, a brown cloak lay across her shoulders, and a light pack hung on her back. "You nearly killed me," Hera said, matter-of-factly. She seemed angrier that he called her a baby than at his traps. "I'm sorry," Mud said, fingering the rope he tied the tree down with. "I didn't know it was you. Hera, what are you doing here?" "Coming with you, of course." She set to work untying Mud's weapons from the trees. "No!" Mud grabbed him away from her. "You're going home. You're too young for a quest like this. I'm as old as you were when Samara said you'd find someone to save Potter's Mill from the beast that killed Mama and Papa." Hera strode over to the base of the tree Mud had been hiding in. Picking up his fallen bow and arrow, she turned back to him. "You shouldn't leave your weapons lying around." Mud sheathed his sword as he spoke in a low, warning voice. "Hera, I'm going to Green Hollow alone, and that's final." He snatched the bow from her hands. Hera glared at him, putting her hands on her hips. "Zedai thinks you need someone with you who can wield a weapon with skill. You need someone who can follow tracks over any terrain, someone who knows the mountains and how to survive in them." "I can do those things," Mud puffed out his chest. Hera rolled her eyes. "You might have been able to do them if you had paid attention to Sedai's lessons, which you didn't. You're lucky to hit a target at 20 paces, and sneaking about isn't going to feed you when your pack is empty. Since I have paid attention, I have the skills that you lack. You need me, and I'm coming." As Mud stared at her, a pang of fear lanced across his chest. "Hera, this is no game. Stop pretending to be a hero and go home. You could have died just now. I might have died if you were better at setting traps. As clever as this one was, it wasn't very practical. I'm coming, no matter what you say." Mud rolled his eyes and growled, shaking with anger. Hera could be more exasperating than anyone. "You're not coming." Hera's shrill voice answered him shout for shout. "Am too coming, and you can't stop me." "Oh, yes, I can," Mud yelled. He grabbed at her, but she dodged away. "If you don't let me travel with you, I'll go to Green Hollow on my own, find the pendant and save Shamara all by myself." Hera's pronouncement echoed above the trees. A low growl answered. Mud and Hera froze. Something heavy thumped against the ground in the forest. A head followed by a second thump, then two more. A shrill hoot filled the air. Then the trees shook as some large creature moved through the underbrush behind them. "Get back!" Mud pushed Hera behind him and readied his bow. By the time he had an arrow on the string, a massive head stretched out of the foliage. A tangled mess of brown feathers and fur covered it, except for its red-rimmed eyes and sharp beak. It let out a harrowing squawk and lunged at Mud. Mud danced back and was surprised to see that the head was not followed by a bird's body, but by that of a giant brown bear. It reared up on its hind legs, showing a regal mass of plumage and fur on its throat and torso as it growled, hooted, and pawed the air with its long claws. Mud gasped. An owlbear! His parents had told him stories of owlbears to scare him into being good at night. Their tales had never stopped him from sneaking out, but now that he was face to face with one, he found it far more frightening than any story. Screeching, it came back down and charged at Mud, its sharp front claws tearing great chunks out of the ground. Mud loosed his arrow. It whizzed past the owlbear's massive shoulder and clattered away into the trees. Mud jerked a second arrow out of his quiver, but never got it to the string. The owlbear closed the distance between them in one lumbering stride. Gasping, Mud dropped his bow and jerked out his sword. The owlbear pecked at Mud. Mud dodged to the side, and its massive beak snapped closed in the air where Mud had been. It hooted angrily and clawed at Mud. Its musky scent filled the air. Mud swung its sword at the owlbear's claws, but the creature was faster. It caught hold of Mud's ankle and lifted him into the air. Mud yelped and hacked at the claw, trying to free himself. His first blow slid off the owlbear's thick feathers. The second chop penetrated, biting into tough skin. The owlbear screeched and pecked at Mud. Mud twisted away from the deadly beak as the owlbear shook him. Mud's head snapped back and forth as he started to see spots. The sword dropped from his limp hands. Hooting in triumph, the owlbear opened its beak to tear out Mud's stomach. End of chapter 5.